Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Stoltari, and I am a genealogist and a passionate traveler. Over the last year or so, I have been featuring each of the Filles du Roi, or King's Daughters, and getting to know their stories a little bit better. There are over 700 of them. I'm on episode 147. You do the math. We've come a long way. We've got a long way to go. We are going to be featuring episode 147, as I've mentioned. But before we begin, I want to show you how you can support the channel. The first three on the left are ways to keep you in the know, which is subscribe, like, and notify. The next three are ways to help the channel grow. I have coffee, which is a really interesting, way of just buying me a coffee. I guess that's the concept. And then we have Etsy, where I have some things that I've designed. And then we have Patreon if you want to become a real supporter of the channel. All of these are ways of showing your support. I also have on my website a link to PayPal if you want to contribute as well. A lot of people have been doing that of late. So thank you so much for everyone who has supported, and let's get on with episode number 147. So episode 147, her name, Catherine Dupuis. And she's actually a viewer request. I looked in my files, and lo and behold, my friend's husband, again, this is one of his great-grandmothers. So let's get to know Catherine a little bit better. So Catherine was born about 1645 in Paris, France. Her parents were André Dupuis and her mother, Catherine Dupuis. Happens a lot in all cultures, second cousins, third cousins, that sort of thing. She would have been born in Ile-de-France, which is part of the region in which Paris is found. She was part of the first arrondissement, and her church that she would have been baptized in her parish was the Church of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois, and it's situated at 2 Place du Louvre, directly across from the Louvre Palace. The current church was built in the 13th century with major modifications in the 15th and 16th. From 1608 until about 1806, it was the parish church for the inhabitants of the palace, and many notable artists and architects who worked on the palace have their tombs in this church. And during the renovations in the fire damaged Notre Dame de Paris, the cathedral's regular services have been held at this church. So it gives you an idea of how large it is. The area of Paris that she would have been born in is le premier arrondissement. As you can see, Paris is done in circles. It's not square, it's a round. And it is one of the oldest areas. It's known as Le Louvre, and it's situated principally on the right bank of the River Seine. And it includes the west end of the Ile de la Cité, which is part of an island that is contained within Paris. It is one of the oldest, as I mentioned. It was the heart of the city around 52 BC. And so, it's been there been there for a long time. And you can see some of the remnants of that occupation still to this day. But as I mentioned, the Louvre Museum is there, the Tuileries Gardens, Le Forum des Halles is the largest shopping mall in Paris, and it is found in here. So the rest of the arrondissement is usually dedicated to business and administration. It's not a residential area now. Obviously, back in her day, it would have been. But still, principally located with the palace and all of that. So really kind of a highbrow place to come from. Well, she arrived on the Phoenix de Fléchage in 1663 on the very first boat. So, and we don't have any other information, no diary information, or whether or not her parents were alive. All we know is she was here first. So let's get to know Catherine and her impact on New France. So Charles was born in 1644 in the parish of Saint-Jacques in Dieppe. Now remember that Dieppe is part of the Normandy region of France. Most of us know the shores of Normandy and all of that from the World War II, but that is, the Dieppe. Obviously, Dieppe is very famous as well. The département, the county that he would have been born in, is Seine-Maritime. And you can see that on the bottom left of your screen. The church where he was presumably baptized dates back to the 12th century. And Dieppe is, as I've said, is obviously known for the famous World War II battle. But it was first noticed as a fishing village in 1030. I have a hard time saying that. It became at one point the #1 port in middle century France. Another claim to fame was its revered school of cartography, i.e. map making, in the 15th century. Two graduates from that school left for the New World and established the first French colony in that place, the New World, in 1564, which is known as Fort Caroline, which would predate St. Augustine, if you can believe it. So, these map makers were essential. They were like, I think of them as, the Bill Gates of that time period, because they really went where no one had gone before. So this is the area of France that Charles was from. So on November 28th, 1663, Catherine and Charles were married. So just amazing how early that marriage took place. Let's have a look at their lives. So let's talk a little bit about this wonderful city called Montreal. And it was eventually, this wonderful city started off as a really, really, outpost, if you will, Ville-Marie, by the founder, Paul de Chomedy, Sœur de Maisonneuve. It was essentially a missionary center. The colony would not thrive. It started in 1642, but it just didn't grow. And it was on the verge of extinction when Chomedy decided to return to France to recruit about 100 settlers, which would be known as La Grande Recrue. From this small group would evolve the Notre Dame congregation from Sister Marguerite Bourgeois, who was part of that Grand Recrue. He went and recruited not only men, but also nuns who would be able to establish, true churches and schools and that sort of thing. When Montreal was founded, the new colonists were rapidly confronted by a fearsome enemy, the Iroquois. And unfortunately, there was no regular army on Montreal soil until 1665, when the Carignan soldiers came. In the meantime, militias capable of resisting Iroquois attacks were set up on January 27, 1663. Chomedy created the Saint-Famille militia to protect Ville-Marie and its inhabitants. It was made up of 139 voluntary colonists, and I suspect that Charles was part of that. Out of that, protecting the island, if you will. By 1678, they had moved to Boucherville. They spent a few years in different places as well. They were moving around, so to speak. They finally settled in Boucherville. Let's talk a little bit about Boucherville. It was founded as a seigneurial parish in 1667 by Pierre Boucher, for whom the city was later named. Pierre Boucher came from the Montagne aux Perches, Normandy, France, which is kind of interesting that that's where Charles was from as well. And after having lived in Quebec City and Three Rivers, Trois-Rivières, Boucher moved to the Percé Islands by the southern shores of St. Lawrence River, where he founded Boucherville. The first Catholic church of the village of Boucherville was built in 1670. So this church, made up of wood, was eventually replaced in 1712 and then 1801. And the church that you see there, Saint Famille, is the end result of all of that. Several families left Boucherville in the 18th century to found the communities of Saint-Julie and Saint-Bruno. So if your family emanates from those places, you may have your roots in Boucherville. I want to also draw your attention to the clip that I put for the 1681 census. We have Charles and Catherine, and we have Antoine, Joseph, Catherine, Jacques, and they have one gun. One cow, and 3 enfants. Now remember, they were moving around, so by then they had just acquired this land. So I suspect that it would grow over time as well. So 3 enfants à valeur is probably about 1.5 acres of land. So they would end up having 10 children baptized. So let's go through them. We have Jean, born in 1664. I put a question mark. No information on him. Catherine, 1666. Marie-Nicole, 1667. François, question mark. Those 4 children are not featured on the 1681 census. Could they have been, placed in a different home? Could they? Yes, it's entirely possible. Certainly Jean could have been married with his own family by then, so it would be another Jean Martin that may not have been featured on the census. I don't know. So this is one of those things where DNA will probably help us out. The first son to actually, the first child to be, featured on the 1681 census is Antoine. And he would go on to marry Françoise Février and have 8 children, all of whom made it to adulthood. Joseph, we have no other information other than we believe that he passed 1685. His twin, Marianne, was not featured on the 1681 census, so we believe she passed before then. Catherine, she was not featured on the 1681 census. Jean-Baptiste was there on the census, but we do know that he passed at 18 years of age. And Marianne would marry Pierre Voisin and have 4 children, but none of them would survive. And now we come to a tragic early death, where so many filles du roi did encounter this. Many didn't, thank goodness. But at the age of 37, Catherine died from complications, giving birth to her last child, Marie-Anne. And she would be buried in Boucherville on December 20th, 1682. This is the Cimetière Sainte-Famille, the church that we looked at, and that this is her burial record. Just a very tragic end for Catherine. And also, we do not know the descendancy from this particular family with Catherine. But as far as I can tell, the only descendancy would be through that one son, Antoine. So if there's some more information that I'm lacking, please let me know, because this is quite remarkable. She would go on to have only 33 descendants. But again, it's not where you start, it's where you end that matters. So my viewer and my friend's husband are both the product of this very, very, tragic end to this lady, but she was able, because of her, they are there. For further research, always look to La Société des Filles du Roi, Québec Genealogical E-Society, Nos Origines, Généalogie Québec, Migration, and Facebook, Filles du Roi Descendants. I have listed the addresses for all of that. So we will end episode 147, but it doesn't really end here, because we have Charles Martin, who goes on to marry another lady, another fille du roi. So we're going to explore her in the next episode. So you may have a continuation. And the reason why I decided to put it together is because obviously, if you're the descendant of Catherine, then you would have had some connection to the next lady as well, because she would have become the step-grandmother, if you will. So with that being said, we're going to go on to episode 148 and explore that fille du roi and the connection she has to this family. But until we do that, I want to just pay homage to Catherine Dupuis for her very short life. But she did the ultimate sacrifice of her life by giving birth to, a lot of children. But ultimately, for now, we only know of the descendants that we know of from Antoine until I can explore other resources. But we thank her for her contribution, and we bless her memory, because without her, my viewer and my friend's husband would not be here. So thank you to Catherine and her story and her sacrifice. And we bless her memory. Until I see you on episode 148, au revoir.